Jane Hedengren is rampaging through the record books. In the fall, she brought U.S. high school cross country to a new level. You know that here at AtoZrunning, we don't toss around terms like GOAT without long-term consideration. I need to warn you, we might be prepared to make an exception. The latest running news is brought to you by AtoZrunning. I'm Zach. And did you get a chance to watch NCAA Indoor Championships? It's free to watch, which is amazing because that's just about the last track and field that is free to watch anywhere for anything. But you can do it, and you could do that right now if you missed it. And it was loaded with upsets. More on that soon. Before we get to that, let's talk a little more about Jane Hedengren. I teased this in the introduction, and I want to start with this because it is just simply too exciting not to. So as a ninth grader, I'm going to tell you the backstory. We got to learn the history. That's one of the things that we like to do here, if you haven't noticed. And as a ninth grader, in the year 2022, Hedengren was exceptional, to be sure, but not star quality. She, as a sophomore, immediately rocketed to prominence at the end of her outdoor track and field season when she ran, or rather won, the Brooks PR Invitational, and then, shortly after that, the Nike Outdoor Nationals Invitational. In that case, running a new sophomore class 2-mile record when she ran 9:54 as a sophomore, as a 10th grader. So then, fast forward a few months to her 11th grade cross-country season, and the record-breaking continued. And you could say, you know, a grade-level record is valuable in terms of, certainly the best at that age, at that time type of thing. But it's high school, and people mature at different times. People rise to excellence at different times in different ways. And that's all fair. But in her 11th grade year as a cross-country runner, she saw yet another record-breaking performance, this time in a lesser contested distance, the cross-country 3-mile. And so most cross-country races, most prominent cross-country races in the United States are 5K in high school, and she ran the 3-mile U.S. high school record. Very impressive stuff as a junior. But then later that year, in terms of her junior year, her 11th grade year of high school, on the track, she proceeded to run a Utah state record in the 1,600 meters and repeated as the Nike Outdoor Nationals 2-mile champion again, which is impressive all by itself. And so the track season continued the steady climb, you could say, as an 11th grader, but still nothing to say this is a one-of-a-kind high school runner until her senior year. And remember cross-country back in the fall when she ran a new U.S. high school cross-country record, the 15 and change performance that she ran that was just outstanding. I think she won that race by like 40 seconds. She then went on to win Nike Outdoor Nationals in the same year and did so in a course record performance, which is particularly notable because it was Caitlin Tuohy's course record. And the day that Hedengren ran a new course record was nasty. It was muddy, it was wet, it was sloppy, and she did amazing things. So now that brings us to this past weekend. And oh, how the star quality rises. So here's what happens. This is the Nike Indoor Nationals now, and a very impressive meet in general to be able to participate in the invitational sections. Hedengren, of course, one of those candidates, and she, in fact, ran the double, the 5,000-mile double, which is a particularly interesting one, to say the least. Not being herself a terribly familiar 5,000-meter runner. She's done a few, but not many as far as prominently. She started with that event on Thursday and then started with some serious gusto. You would say a runner of her caliber is likely to be a kind of pariah in a sense in the distance community. But that happens to not be the case in this race because Hedengren had serious company in the likes of California standout Riley Blade, which is another name that you may think, it sounds vaguely familiar because we've talked about her as a top finisher in some things like cross-country performances and such. But what we didn't note at the time and need to correct ourselves is Riley Blade actually this past cross-country season broke Hedengren's own 3-mile record. She actually obliterated it, chopped like 15 seconds off the time or so, and just an outstanding thing. So then now in this 5,000 meter instance, you could say, well, it's no surprise that Blade would be one who's willing to contest Hedengren in her caliber, such as it is. So she did just that, and the two of them did incredible things together in that race, both running under the previous under 20 U.S. 5,000 meter record. And that's significant because we're not talking about high school records anymore. It was that as well, but an under 20 record includes early collegiate runners because many early collegiate runners are 18, 19 years old and not turning 20 in that year, which is how that record works. So Hedengren bested Blade by a few seconds to run 15:13. Yes, I just said it. A high school girl ran 15:13. And Riley Blade, in second place behind her, ran 15:16. So here's what you need to know about this. First, if they were in the NCAA, for instance, that would have been 9th, Hedengren's time, on the NCAA or collegiate all-time performance list. 9th all-time. And she's not a collegiate. She's still a high schooler. And would have been, or rather is, because she is an American, 38th on the U.S. all-time indoor 5,000 meter performance list. So that puts it in perspective for you. We're talking about all calibers of all ages. This is also the 24th fastest time by any woman in the world this year as a high schooler. So not bad. Jane Hedengren. Oh, by the way, number 6 on the world all-time under 20 list as well. Nearly cracking top 5, which is just incredible stuff. Riley Blade only a couple of spots behind Hedengren in those same performances, as mentioned. And Blade, what a name, right? Riley Blade. She just must be a competitive athlete with a name like that, you would think. Okay, so anyway, as it were, the two of them just were incredible. But for Hedengren, it did not end there, because a few days later, she ran the mile for the Nike Indoor Championships and just did it all again is basically the way to say it. Now, this was in some ways not as impressive of a performance because it wasn't quite the same scale comparatively, but still incredible. And so Hedengren ran the mile totally by herself. She won the race by 14 seconds. It was nearly a 10-second personal best for her in the mile, which just tells you exactly what she's up to right now relative to even her own performances. It's really something, isn't it? And so she runs this massive personal best, wins the race by a ton. She ran 4:26, which bested by a second Sadie Englehart's month-old high school mile record. So only a month ago, Englehart broke the mile record in 4:27. Hedengren lopped another second off of it to run 4:26. It's only 2 seconds behind Mary Cain's under 20 record, which is an incredible record, 4:24. Recall that record also would have been, when Mary Cain did it, would have been the NCAA record, although she was not running collegiately. She was already at the time running for Alberto Salazar in that Nike thing, and that totally imploded. It was a very tragic situation, but as it were, Hedengren ran a new high school record and also marked number 6 on the world under 20 all-time performance list. And so you get a sense of the caliber of athlete we're talking about right now. And we're talking about Jane Hedengren as a high school runner, but relative to all other runners as well. She just ran that 4:26, being the 30th fastest mile run by anyone in the world this year. So 30th on the world performance list right now, which is incredible. How many times have I said that? What an amazing thing, and it just doesn't get more exciting than this when you're watching some of the best of all time. So I said it in the introduction. Would I toss around phrases like greatest of all time? I don't know, because I am not willing to toss around phrases like that in short-term reflections. However, it is abundantly clear that Hedengren is performance-wise, and at least in isolated instances, among the best ever high school runners in the United States. And so we can talk about that without any doubt. Now we just have to wait and see what happens in the outdoor season. And it's going to be exciting either way. By the way, Hedengren is committed to BYU to run collegiately. And so BYU already an incredible program under Diljeet Taylor. And now just, adding more to the ranks of what is one of the most dominant women's distance programs in the country in the collegiate scene. Okay, well, let's talk about the collegiate scene since we're on that topic. The NCAA championships, indoor championships, were rife with stars and upsets, which is how these things work. It's always the case, especially at the collegiate level. You have a lot of up-and-comers that just show up big in the right moments. And then you also have a lot of predictable champions who just know how to get the job done. And when they clash, anything's possible. So let's talk about a few of the events. I'm not going to go through every single thing. I'm not going to talk all the details, but I want to at least talk through some that were exciting to me and to us. So let's start with the women's 5,000 meters, particularly notable because it was fast. In fact, it was Amy Bunnage of Stanford, you could say, who is to credit for the fast race. She basically rabbited the race for 3,000 meters, took it out fast, kept the hammer down, and then suddenly at about 3,000 meters, dropped out. And so that's why I say she basically rabbited the race. You got the feeling like it was on purpose. And maybe not. Maybe she was just kind of putting herself out there to see what she had, and when she realized that it's just not there, she pulled the plug. She had a bunch of kinesio tape on her knee and was like kind of hobbling after the race, which it didn't look good. But then the next day she ran the 3,000 meters and looked fine. So I don't know what to think about that. Although I do know that in the collegiate level in particular, there have been penalties in the past for if you don't finish one event, you can't compete in the next. Unless there's some kind of health concern reason. And so you've seen runners do this where they feign a hamstring, like they grab their hamstring and drop out and they kind of limp away, and then the next day they win a national title, right? And so it's like, who knows? Not to say that Bunnage won a national title the next day, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so after Bunnage dropped out, it just slowed to a crawl, pedestrian. They were walking basically, and I see that and I think, all that work that Bunnage just did, and they're just throwing it away. But really, they weren't. Okay, so arguably, they may have run a new collegiate record if they would have continued on with what they were doing. But no one wanted to take the lead right away. And when you've got the likes of Doris Lemengole, who is a two-time NCAA champion, most notably defending cross-country champion. Not defending because she's not defending it yet, but she's the most recent cross-country champion. And collegiate best in the 5,000 meters as well. So there's no doubt that people are just kind of waiting to see what she's going to do. Well, she didn't want to do anything. She just was patient. I will wait is how she played that one. And so it was BYU's Lexi Halliday-Lowry who shook things up with a few laps to go, almost took it. She was making the moves at the exact right moment, but Lemengole had the better final 25 meters. I mean, there's all it came down to was the last 25 meters. Halliday-Lowry would have done it, but for Lemengole's kick, and she earned herself her third NCAA title. It's the steeple last year, cross country this past, and now the 5,000 meters indoors. And we'll see what happens the next day in the 3,000 if she can make it fourth. So in the men's 5,000, similar story. It was fast, except they did not relent. And you can give all the credit for that to Habtom Samuel, of New Mexico, who wanted it to be fast, so he took it out. We didn't take it out initially, but he started going early, and then he just kept it fast. When it started slowing, he'd go back to the front, and he'd start moving. And he was banking on the fact that, as by far one of the best in terms of raw numbers performers in the field, he had a good shot at winning the fastest race. But Brian Musau of Oklahoma State disagreed and made that opinion known when, for the first time in the entire race, he took the lead in the final 200 meters and hit just savage kick. He ran 26 seconds for the last 200 meters, which is blazing fast. Won the race in 13:11, which is a new championship record, and brought 6 more men with him under the previous championship record. So that 7 bested the previous time of 13:19, including Hampton Samuel and others. It was 5 men in the field who ran personal best times, which is an uncommon thing at a championship race. And so you can know that was a quick one. So shout out to Musau for the win. How about the women's mile? Let's talk about that very briefly, only because you would have said Shalon Ayildiz of Oregon, who set the national record, or the collegiate record, I should say, earlier this year, was a clear favorite for the race, having been an Olympian herself, having maybe she wasn't. Did she compete in the Olympics, or she qualified? But I can't recall the story. A recent addition to the NCAA out of via Turkey, and placed 4th. And so if Shalon was not going to be the runner up front, your next guess would probably not have been her Oregon teammate, Wilma Nielsen, except it was. And Nielsen took the prize. So Oregon taking 1st and 4th, which was likely a significant contribution to what amounted to an eventual team title for the Ducks to take the indoor championships team title. And that being Jerry Schumacher's first. They keep saying Jerry Schumacher's the head coach of Oregon, but he is not by any stretch the only person coaching these women. As a matter of fact, he's not directly coaching most of these women. And so a shout out to the team of coaches there in Oregon who put together a great program once again. Now, in the women's 3,000, we talked about those doubling back from the 5,000 the day before. It's like not even 24 hours apart, and that is tight. But a well-trained runner generally can do it. And so Doris Lemengole was out for the double and definitely making herself known more prominently and earlier in the race than she was in the 5,000. But it was actually West Virginia's Sealy McCabe who really mixed things up after an early stiff pace set by, any guesses? Amy Bunnage of Stanford. Again, and I don't know what to think about that, but she, the day before, dropped out of the 5,000 with hobbling knee, and then the next day, no tape on her knee, and she looked totally fine. So who knows? Maybe they just have some really good juice there. But Bunnage clearly does not like running slowly, whether it was by design to help teammates or something like that, or it was just because her comfort zone is moving fast near the front of the race. That's exactly what she was doing. And yet she was not there when the race started heating up. And so then it was Sealy McCabe who took over for the last 1,000 meters, and just slowly squeezed the trigger and just kept the pressure, so that when Lemengole came up and Pamela Koske came up and they were going for the moves, McCabe was ready to maintain her lead throughout. And in the final 25 meters, continued to pull away such that constant acceleration was just incredibly impressive. But the tragedy of it all was the jockeying for second place between Lemengole and Koske amounted to Koske stepping on the rail and falling nearly flat on her face. It was very unfortunate. With only 10 or 15 meters to go, right at the end, falls flat, and instead of finishing second or third, ends up 11th, which was a major bummer, no doubt about it. Okay, how about the men's 3,000? Let's keep moving along here. In the men's 3,000, we now have the doubling back of many of the distance medley relay favorites. In particular, and most notable, Gary Martin of Virginia, who anchored Virginia's DMR to their first ever national title on Friday, and did so by unleashing a savage final 200 meters to best Ethan Strand, who is the NCAA record holder in the mile. And Gary Martin, by the way, the number 2 miler ever in collegiate history. So no surprise that the two of them were going to be duking it out in that DMR. But neither of them ran the open mile, in part because of doubling back from the distance medley relay. And so they both ran the 3,000 meters. Arguably Strand's better event, you could say, because his national record, while only slightly better than his teammate Parker Wolf's time in the same race. They ran together and they almost brought it down to the line. And yet Strand's record, along with teammate Parker Wolf, is significantly faster than other NCAA times. So that you could say he probably has some advantage over someone like Gary Martin, who can match his performance in the mile as judged by that DMR too. But also Martin does not have quite the same repertoire at the 3,000. So maybe that was a strategic decision. Who knows? But one side note is Parker Wolf, while the second fastest collegiate runner ever in the event, also was struggling all winter, apparently coming back from or recovering from an illness, which is really unfortunate, as this, I believe, is his final indoor season. He's a senior. Whether it's like a senior with more eligibility, I don't know. So Parker Wolf was in the race, but he was not necessarily in the conversation as a favorite because of the difficulties through the winter. So let's talk about how this race went down then, because first I have to mention the announcers are somewhat obsessed with Gary Martin's glasses. He wears his glasses while he runs and while he races, and they couldn't stop talking about it. Like when they talk, okay, 2 examples. They called his distance medley relay victory. He was the anchor leg in the victory team. They called it a spectacle in spectacles, which, like, literally, those were their words, the announcers. I have a problem with saying that. That is awful. Don't do that. Don't do that to me. But it didn't end there, because then throughout the race, they kept referring to him as Clark Kent, because he's Superman, but he's wearing glasses. I don't know. At least twice they referred to him as Clark Kent, and I struggled. I could not watch the race without muting it so that I didn't have to hear this conversation. But maybe that's just me. So Gary Martin and Ethan Strand dueled it out in the distance medley relay, and Gary Martin and Ethan Strand dueled it out again in the 3,000 meters, and it was really something. And it came down to Martin making a decisive move in the last lap. It's 200 meters to go because it's a short track, and it was very powerful move. But Strand was ready for it, and so he just joined him, just got right up behind him as Martin went by, and then with 100 meters to go, Strand turned over, and it was the exact replica of the night before in reverse. Strand took off with 100 meters to go, and Martin had no answer, and it was an impressive sprint. As a matter of fact, Ethan Strand finished the last 200 meters in 25 seconds, which is very, very fast. We mentioned Musau's 5,000 meter finish in 26 seconds, also very, very fast, but Strand taking it to another level. So Gary Martin, second, and Wisconsin's Adam Spencer, who's an Australian Olympian, finished third. Also running impressive. So there you have it. The 3,000 meters were exciting races too. Let's wrap it up with the 800, because I don't have a lot that I necessarily want to say about it, except that these were both, for the men's and the women's races, major upsets. You just talk about a scenario where you wouldn't be able to predict the results. In the women's race, there were 3 previous NCAA champions in this event. And so you had Roisin Willis of Stanford, who won the NCAA indoor title as a freshman 2 years ago. And then you had Michaela Rose, who won the outdoor title that same year. And then you had Juliette Whitaker of Stanford, who won the indoor and outdoor title last year, and then finished 7th in the Olympic final in the 800 meters. So clearly some major powerhouse 800-meter runners for NCAA standards and even otherwise. Well, Juliet Whitaker didn't even make it out of semis into finals. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly why. I think there's a backstory to that. But she didn't even make it out into the final. And then when it came down to it, Michaela Rose was never a factor. She just wasn't. I don't know if it's a tactical decision or if she just wasn't quite, at her top of her game. But what it came down to was early in the race, UNC's Michaela Page went to the front and then got tripped and almost went down on her face, like arms flailing, leaning way far forward. Somehow she kept her feet, which is, take notes, runners. That's what you need to do. Stay on your feet, because if once you're down, there's hardly any chance you're recovering. But she kept her feet. And then, whether it's because of what happened or because of this was the plan all along, she just stayed at the front and just kept pushing. And then what it came down to was no one could reel her in. They were close. They stayed with her. And there was even a kind of counter move at one point, but Paige never relented the lead and won her first NCAA title. As a matter of fact, that was her first NCAA final, and she won the title, which is an incredible performance, especially given the field that you had coming into the race. So not bad at all for Michaela Page of UNC, but on the men's side, a similar story. You've certainly got some strong runners in this field that you might anticipate being likely champions. And yet, the one to win the race had never even made an NCAA final before, much like Michaela Page. And it was Matthew Erickson of Oregon, a Canadian out of Oregon, who won his first NCAA title as well. So there you go. The upsets in the 800 meters in particular were significant. So let's talk through. We've got a couple more things here and other running news going on around the world and some interesting stuff. First, the sad news. And I don't like to end on sad news, so that's why I'm saying this first. The sad news was another suspension, another doping violation suspension, although in this instance it was a kind of whereabouts violation, which the Kenyan Athletics Integrity Unit was calling evading, refusing, and or failing to submit a sample. And so now the athlete we're talking about is where things get heavy, because this was previous world record holder Kibiwot Candy, who he arguably could be said to be, aside from Jacob Kiplimo, the best half marathoner of all time. He has incredible performances, multiple world record performances. He's run faster than anybody else more times, except for Jacob Kiplimo. So now what you've got is a provisional suspension based on a kind of whereabouts violation that could turn into something worse, or a longer term suspension or ban. And so that would not be great. That not good for the sport, not good for Candy, but also a really odd scenario here. I mean, it's evading, refusing, failing to submit a sample is generally not accidental, although it certainly could be. Hard to prove. Hard to prove, right? But that's a bummer. So we'll see how that unfolds, and we may keep you posted if we learn more. Now let's end on an exciting note, because there are road races happening too. It's not just indoor track and field going on right now, and among them the New York City Half Marathon and the LA Marathon. So I want to talk about a couple quick highlights from those. One, Conor Mantz in the New York City Half ran another U.S. record half marathon performance. It was his own record. He bested it by 2 seconds. And yet the New York City Half is known as a difficult course in particular. And so that's notable. But also, it's just telling you, like, this guy's just he's on a level right now. I don't know exactly what level it is, but it's a level, and it's a good one. And that's exciting because he's also running Boston here next month, and it's clear that he's in good shape and ready to go for it. So we'll see how that unfolds. U.S. half marathoner, or road runner, I should say, Hillary Bohr also ran under 60 minutes. Conor Mantz's time was 59:15, new U.S. record. Hillary Bohr ran 59:55 to be the 5th American ever to run under 60 minutes. Very impressive stuff. Hillary Bohr, who set the U.S. 10-mile record last year, and also has demonstrated a real affinity for these distances on the roads, which is very exciting. So how about in the LA Marathon then? Do you know the name Matt Richman? The answer probably is no, because there's not a lot of reason to know his name. He ran his first ever marathon this past fall at the Twin Cities Marathon. He finished in 2:10:47, which is a great debut. It's very impressive. Really exciting. He's a young guy. He's only 25 years old. He's really recently out of college. So he would not be on anyone's radar significantly. Well, he just won the LA Marathon, becoming the first American to do so in 31 years. And he did by running 2:07:56 for his second ever marathon. What was this? That is really exciting, people. Very exciting. In some part because it's just fast running and you like to see good performances, but also Richmond is new to the event. He is fresh on the scene. He's young, and that tells you that there's some real potential as well. His first one was great. His second one was even better. Where's this going to go? And now I am very excited to follow this. You could say we've just got another great potential U.S. marathoner on the scene and may help elevate this event for us. The United States has struggled to be able to call itself a globally competitive nation in the marathon. There have been moments. Galen Rupp's Olympic medal, for instance, is a good one. And yet, U.S. men in particular do not tend to perform exceptionally versus Kenya, Ethiopia, and Japan in particular. And so what does it take to get there, or to get closer to there, I should say? We'll see. Matt Richman might be one of those who can help move it along. Also, he won $20,000, which is no bad thing. You take that when you get it. $10,000 for winning the race and another $10,000 for winning the gender battle, which would have happened regardless of who won, because second place, I think, was about 2.5 minutes behind Richmond, but he was still ahead of whatever the gender battle mark was, because the women's race just wasn't as fast, and probably because it was a little bit more tactical, it sounds like. So there you go. That is definitely exciting stuff. Now let's start wrapping it up with a little more exciting news, because we like to share some shout outs for the A to Z runners who are doing the thing as well. And in this past weekend, we had a number of participants in races, starting with the Bay City St. Patrick's Day races. Yeah, it is St. Patty's Day races. That's true. In the 8K, Bill finished first in his age group in a personal best time. It may have, in fact, have been his first 8K officially, but it was a personal best, whether or not it was his first, because it would be. And first age group, which is impressive. And then Elijah ran both. And so they have a 5K and an 8K at this event. And if you do both, you can sign up for what they call the Irish Double. And so it's scored separately from each individual race, which is kind of cool. Elijah ran both and finished first in his age group in the Irish Double as well. And his first time ever doing one of those setups where you run one race and 30 minutes later you run the other. It's kind of fun. Now, jumping across the state of Michigan to the Irish Jig 5K, we had CJ, who ran finished second in his age group also. And we had Brian and Ethan. So shout outs to them and everybody participating in these wonderful events. Some fast running, some running that's not necessarily supposed to be fast, but still enjoying it, and everything under the sun. It's really good stuff. So that's it for this week's running news. But here's the thing. You don't want to miss next week, because we're going to be reporting on the World Indoor Championships, which will be just awesome. It's always a lot of fun. But also, you don't want to miss the other content we're sharing. And if you haven't caught on yet, A to Z Running is sharing content in many different forms and fashions. But in particular, check us out on YouTube, where you'll get the most of our content. Not only our running news, which we're posting weekly to share what's going on in the world of running, but also our helpful topics where we talk about training, we talk about health, we talk about what runners need in order to do the thing we're trying to do well. And those episodes generally come out within a few days of the running news. And so if you've caught some, make sure you tune back in because you catch the others. And then we're also sharing additional content that is more precise and specific via things like YouTube Shorts and otherwise to try to continue to help provide ways and means to support your running and your running endeavors. So be sure to catch all of that great stuff, and we'll look forward to talking with you next time.